Okay, we are now recording. Okay, as I said in my email note to you, I thought it would be worthwhile to split up these little talks into at least 4 separate sessions. This one was intended to be a general orientation so that you got a little bit of a feel how to navigate around the On1 screen, how to open a photo, how to play with a photo, how to save the photo. Real basic stuff. So this way you won't be afraid to use On1 between now and our next session. So the first one is, this one is orientation. The next section will talk about masking. What is masking? Well, imagine that you have a photograph laying on the table, and then imagine that you have a clear piece of glass that is colored yellow, and you lay it on top of that photo. Now, you haven't changed the photo, but when you look at the photo, it now looks different. Well, that's layers. Well, what if you didn't want all of that photo to look yellow? You only wanted a portion of that photo to look yellow. So if you had a way of removing part of that yellow glass away from the glass that you laid on top of the photo, so part of the photo would still be looking through the glass and be yellow, but the rest of the photo would be clear because the glass is not in front of the photo. That process of either putting yellow on top of the photo or removing the yellow from the rest of the photo is called masking. All right, so it's not a global effect. It's just placing effects on only portions of the photo. It's very important that we learn the skill of masking because you can't do layers without masking. All right. The third session that we're going to have talks about portraits. I want to show you a number of different ways that you can adjust people's faces so that it better matches what you are trying to achieve. Removing blemishes, that sort of thing. There's lots of different tools, some of which you'll find very impressive. The fourth session will get into layers. And we'll talk about how to use the On1 tools in order to create layers. And I think what you'll find is that it's not nearly as intimidating as it sounds. And it's certainly not as intimidating as if you were trying to use it in Photoshop Elements, which has really basic tools and is not very user-friendly when it comes to things like layers. Okay, that's what we intend to do over the next couple of weeks. And now I will share my screen and start talking about On1. Okay, On1, share. Okay, everybody ought to see the beginning screen. When you start up On1, it usually starts up in the section called Browse. In the upper right-hand corner, you can see that it says Browse. Hang on one second here. Is there a way for me to just have my video and nobody else's video showing on the screen? Does anybody know how to do that? Because all of the videos are, well, it's, I can do that. All right.
Yes, you can change it.
All right, I'm good.
You good?
I'm good. In the upper right-hand corner, you see the word browse. And browse means opening up your directories so that you can find the photos that you want. All right. On the far left-hand side, up here at the top, it will show you all of your drives, all of your directories. Right now, you see it says C drive because I only have one drive, and that's the C drive. If I click on the little arrow pulling down, it then shows me all of the directories on my C drive where I can then find where I store my photos. All right, so everybody ought to know where their photos are stored on their computer. My photos right now, the one where I'm showing here on the main screen, I've stored all of those on my desktop, and so the desktop is what's selected. Up at the top here, you can see what my selection is. It is my desktop subdirectory. Wherever you find your photos, it'll show the subdirectory there. Just want to point out that at the bottom here, you can also find photos if you put photos in your Dropbox, in your Google Drive, in your OneDrive. You can open photos from those locations. You can save photos to those locations. So you have full interactivity between every place where you have photos. Just in case you haven't gotten that far, let me just show you. If you come up to Edit, under Edit, it says Preferences. And on Preferences, the last tab, which says Services, allows you to select whether or not you use and want to see things from Dropbox, Google Drive, or Microsoft OneDrive. If you have no photos in any of those, you can just unclick these check marks, and then they won't show up on the bottom left-hand side. All right, but that's if you have photos there and you don't see this, that's where you would go. You would go to the Edit Preferences, and you would turn those on just by clicking in that little box. Okay? Okay. You have display options on the bottom. Right now, what I've chosen is this grid to view everything that's in that subdirectory. You can also just have an individual photo, a film strip. I'll show you the film strip now. I'll click on the film strip, and you see on the bottom are all of the photos, and any one that you click on will open in that screen. Click on a different one, and that will open on the screen. All right, so that's film strip as opposed to the grid selection. This is just a personal preference. All right. On all of your photos, some of these are further subdirectories, but on all of the ones that are photos, you'll notice that at the very top, in a little bit faint, it shows stars. You can rank these as 1 star, 2, 3, 4. You can select a heart, which means I love this photo. This is one of my favorites. You can hit this box, which gives you more flexibility. You can group these by color. You can say, all right, these photos are my red photos, or these photos are my yellow photos. It has no significance other than in the future, if you want to find a specific group, you can then do an advanced search. For instance, if I say, I love this photo, and I love this photo, and in the future, I open up On1, and I only want to find the photos that I love, I will come down here on the left-hand side, I'm still in the local drive area. I will turn on advanced search. You turn it on by a little click in that little circle. And if I say, just show me the ones that I said I liked, I should only see those two. Why didn't it work? I don't know. One, two, three, like, advanced search, liked. I don't know why it didn't work. It should work. I've done it in the past. Never mind, let's move on. One other thing, if you have a thumb drive and you want to get your photos from the thumb drive, as soon as you plug your thumb drive in, it again will show up on your list of drive availabilities. And then you can find the photo within the thumb drive. All right, I'm going to open one photo. I'm going to open that photo. All right. Now, once you've chosen, once you've got to move this a little bit out of the way. Okay. Once you've chosen a photo, now you can see that there are, you should see the photo up on the top here. And then there are other tabs at the top. One is levels, all right? One is information. It's going to tell you everything about the photo. It's going to tell you what camera you used. It's going to tell you about what ISO, what shutter speed, what f-stop, everything about the photo, because that's embedded in the photo, all right? Navigation, when you are adjusting the photo, navigation winds up being the most important of those screens. Now we come down below and we see that there are 4 different modules. There's develop, effects, portrait, and local. Today we'll start with talking about develop, right? If you look at the develop screen here, you see that it looks very similar to what we're used to seeing in Elements, Photo Raw. All of the same types of slides. There's a couple of extra ones. There's a mid-tone that you didn't have before. It's just an additional adjustment, and you can play with those as you see fit. Structure is a little bit like sharpening. Haze will remove fog or haze from a photo. And then you've got color adjustments. And if you want to white balance, you can click on this little dropper and go to a white area or a black area or a gray area and click on that, and it'll color balance for you. When we go down a little bit further, let's see. Here we go. There's a section called Details. Details has the sharpening and noise reduction adjustments. Lens correction is an interesting one. The program will know, based on the information, it knows what kind of camera you've used. If you tell it if it knows what kind of camera you used and it knows what lens you've used, it knows whether or not there are any inherent distortions that lens provides in the picture. And if it does, it will automatically adjust and correct for those distortions. If you don't know, if it doesn't know, or it doesn't know what kind of lens correction to make, you can always do manual adjustments. For instance, here's distortion. I'm adjusting the distortion of this photo that I took with my smartphone. And finally, the last section is transform. And transform will allow you to adjust for keystoning. That's when the tops of the buildings look like they're leaning into each other. This is where you can level the photo. If you click on that and you draw a line, it will then level to that line. A couple of other adjustments that I found fairly unique. If, for instance, you took the photo and you took it from above the person, and so the person looks like they're leaning into the photo and their head is bigger than the rest of their body, you can actually adjust that. You can actually tilt the photo to undo that. You can rotate the photo horizontally. Now, having said all of that, I almost never go into the details, lens correction, or transform. I spend virtually all of my developing time in the tone and color, the basic adjustments like you have in Elements. These all are global adjustments. So just like in Elements, if I adjust the exposure, it's going to adjust the exposure everywhere. If I change the contrast, it's going to change the contrast everywhere. This is not specific to a specific area. Oh, I ought to mention that if you want to reset any of these sliders back to 0, all you have to do is double click on the title and it'll go back to 0. All right. Now, if you want to make these types of adjustments only to one small area on your photo, you can then go to local. Local is the exact opposite of develop. Develop says anything I slide is going to touch everything. If I click on local, you get the same slides, the same sliders, except it's adjusting it for nowhere until you paint on it. So let me give you an example. I'm going to make the exposure lower, so it's going to make things darker wherever I paint. I'll turn your attention to the top of the screen because anytime you are painting, you can adjust 3 things. You can adjust the size of the brush. You can adjust how much the brush has a feather. That means how soft the edges are. If the feather is 0, wherever you paint is going to be a very hard edge. If you feather up to 100%, it's going to be very foggy on the outside. It's barely going to make the adjustment on the outside, and it'll make most of the adjustment only in the center. And opacity is how much of the effect do you want to be on the screen. So if you don't want to be fully that dark, but only partially that dark, you might turn the opacity down from 100% to some other lower number, all right? But since we're in here and I've adjusted the exposure down, I've got my paintbrush, and if I hold down my mouse and I paint, anywhere that I paint that brush is going to adjust that opacity. In all of On1, if you're not happy with what you just did, just as in most other Windows programs, if you go up to Edit in the upper left-hand corner, you can hit Undo, and it'll get rid of what you just did. All right, hit one undo, it does the last step. The next undo is the step before that. There are a number of different ways to adjust the size of the brush. You can come up here and you can use this slider. I don't like to do it that way because then you really don't have the brush sitting on the photo, so you don't really know how big you want the brush to be. I find the easiest way to adjust the brush is by using your keyboard, and there are bracket keys that are just to the right of the letter P. And if you hit one of them, it gets bigger. And if you hit another one of them, it gets smaller. All right? If you want to zoom in on the picture in order to make finer adjustments, there are two ways to do it. If you have a mouse that has a roller, that is by far and away the easiest way. If I am using the roller, I am now turning the roller and I am zooming in. And now if I turn the roller the other way, I'm zooming out. If you don't have that, the way to zoom in and out is to hold down the control key. And while you're holding down the control key, hit plus or minus key. The minus key will zoom you out, and the plus key will zoom you in. All right? One main difference on negotiating your way around a picture is how do I, if I've zoomed in on a picture, how do I go left in the picture or right in the picture? In the upper right-hand corner here, where the button said navigation, you'll see that since we zoomed in on the picture, there's another little square that has now shown up. That square is how you move around on this picture. So if I grab that square and I move that square this way, you see that I was able to move to the left. If I grab the square and I come to the right, I can move around and go to the right. If I want to fill the screen again with the original photo, I just hit the word fit and I'm back to where I started from. Another way to zoom in is with these other three buttons. If you hit 100, you will zoom in a certain amount. If you hit 50, you'll zoom in a certain amount. If you hit 25, you'll zoom in a certain amount. And again, fit brings you back to, all right, hold on one second. Debbie has a question. Yes, Debbie.
Okay, if you have a touch screen, can you do it that way?
If you I have a touch screen, you cannot increase the size. I just tried increasing the size by doing, the 2-finger stretch, and
Yeah.
no, you can't do it.
But all right, thank you.
Okay. All right, so that's develop and that's local. Let's see if there was anything. Okay, one other thing. We're used to seeing in Photoshop elements which locations are blown out, either with whites or with blacks. In On1, the way you can see what's blown out is by holding down the J key. I hold down, and has nothing to do with me. Hold down the J key, you can see on the pole, suddenly the red shows up. And I'll demonstrate more. If I make the whites stronger, the reds show up. If I make the blacks stronger, the blues show up. So it's the same deal with the reds and the blacks, but they won't show up unless you're holding down the red key, the J key. You hold down the J key and it shows up. You can make whatever adjustments you want in develop and then let go of the J key, and then you're good to go. All right. Okay. The next tab is effects, and this is where On1 starts to really shine. And this is where you do special effects, all right? There are hundreds and hundreds of special effects, and all of these special effects are modifiable, all right? If you click on Add Filter, you'll see that there are 30 different categories of special effects. And we won't be going into those now. You can play with those to your heart's content, but each of those have multiple choices. All right. I'm going to select one. I'm going to select dynamic contrast. Now, the way to think of all of these effects is as though it's a layer. These effects are going on top of the photo, just like that yellow piece of glass. It is not affecting the original photo. It is not destroying the original photo. You can undo anything that you've put on that original photo. All right. Dynamic contrast. This is one of the this is one of the favorite adjustments. It's a little hard to see. To turn any effect on and off, all you have to do is just click on this little yellow button. It's off, and now it's on. I don't know if you can see the effect. I'll pull up another photo later that is of the leaves of a flower, and then you'll see the effect of dynamic contrast. You can add an effect on top of an effect on top of an effect, and all of those will be a cumulative effect. Let's go to another effect called color enhancer. All right. Now, color enhancer, by its name, you can adjust the color of the entire screen. So let's just increase the saturation of everything on the screen. Right? I just slid the saturation. I can virtually make this a black and white photo. I can make this a full color photo. All right? And again, if I turn the color enhancer off, I turn the color enhancer on. Each of these effects have their own slider that says opacity. And what that means is if I wanted to do the color enhancer, but I only wanted it to do somewhat, then I could slide the opacity down to, say, 50%, 40%, whatever your eye says is the amount you were looking for. I have a separate slider under dynamic contrast, so I can adjust its opacity independent of what I wanted to do with the color enhancer. So each effect is totally adjustable. All right. Down here, it says preview. Let me go back up to color enhancer and turn the saturation and the opacity to full. If I click on preview, it will show you what the original photo looked like. There's the original photo. And then when I click on it again, it shows you everything that you've adjusted, all of the effects. When I click on these buttons here, it's just turning off that individual effect, but it's leaving all of the other effects on. All right. Let me show you, now that we've made adjustments to this photo, you now are going to want to save this photo. Right? The way you save the photo, On1 doesn't call it save, On1 calls it export. And on the bottom right-hand side, you see the word export. And if I click on export, come on. Next week, I expect to be doing this on my faster machine. And we won't have these times where it locks up. There we go. Okay, I hit export, and now an export screen shows up, an export window, where it's going to ask, what format do you want? Do you want it as a JPEG photo, a Photoshop photo? So I'm going to select JPEG photo. And then it's going to ask, where do you want to put it? If you don't want it to the current folder, then you say folder, and then I'll just show you that, folder, and then you're going to choose, and then you're going to tell it using this file manager, where do you want the photo to go? So you have full control over where you want the photo to go. Now, you don't have to worry about overwriting your original photo, because when you come down here and you hit export, it's going to export it as the same file name, but after it, it's going to say copy. Let's go over to browse, because browse is where we pulled the original photo from. And you'll notice I now have the original photo here, and I have the new photo that adds the word copy to it. So this is your new photo. Boom, you're done adjusting it. What if I want to go back to the original photo and make changes to my adjustments? No problem. All you do is double click on that photo. It comes back. If I hit effects, you'll see here's all of the color enhancer effects that I made. Here's all of the dynamic contrast adjustments I made. It hasn't affected the base photo. If I eliminate this, I can close and eliminate this effect just by hitting this X. It's no longer doing dynamic. If I hit this, it's no longer doing the color enhancer. That original photo is still there. It's never been touched. Just the layers of adjustments have been touched. Any questions about this? All right. I want to show you one more thing. All right, I'm going to just go back to browse a second. For those of you who installed On1 on the same computer as Photoshop Elements, I want to go to Photoshop Elements. How do I get? Bear with me a second. Okay. Here's Photoshop Elements. If I've made adjustments in Photoshop Elements, and now I want to go and make more adjustments using On1, All I need to do, I don't have to do copy, I don't have to do save and then open it in On1. All I have to do is go up in Elements to the Filter button, click on the Filter button, and when you installed On1, it probably said we found Photoshop Elements. I am going to link to that. And then On1 will show up here on the pull down. And when I come down here, I can click on Effects. And what it's going to do is open up On1 and bring that photo right into On1, ready for adjustments. I can then make whatever adjustments I want. All right, let's say I want to do dynamic contrast. All right, I'm going to exaggerate this a bit, but let me zoom in on this flower, and I'm using that box to come up here. All right, this is with dynamic contrast on. That's with dynamic contrast off. Again, that's with dynamic contrast on. You can see that it has found the detail in the flower that simply didn't exist or just wasn't visible in the original photo. All right, now I've exaggerated the dynamic contrast, so it's giving me some artifacts, but that's what dynamic contrast does. Now, let's go to my other favorite filter, which is my color enhancer, because we've got a nice colorful flower. Now, instead of doing these global effects, one of the reasons that I love color enhancer is because of the section down below, which allows you, without even painting, to just adjust individual colors. Let's say I want to change the color of the green grass behind it. I've got the entire rainbow of colors here. I will click on green, and then I will change the saturation of the green. You notice that the green grass got greener, or I could slide it the other way and the green grass basically became black and white. It does not affect the other colors. Let's say I want to affect the yellow of the flower. I clicked on yellow and I changed the saturation of the yellow in the flower to 0. I can go all the way up to blowing it out. But it didn't change the red in the middle, because that's what the saturation, the global saturation would have done. If I hit the red, I can adjust this orangey red color. I can change the saturation and make it more saturated. I can make it less saturated. I am not affecting the rest of the flower. I am only adjusting that color. Another thing that you can do is you can even adjust the hue of that color red. I can make it more red. I can make it less red. If I had grass, I could make the grass more yellow. I could make the grass less yellow. All right. When I am done with all of my adjustments, I don't export. You notice the export button is no longer lit. Export is only when you're working in On1 with On1, not with elements. You hit the word done down at the bottom. I hit the word done and you just wait, and it's going to register all of the changes that I just made to that flower. And when it's done, it's going to jump me back to elements. Again, this laptop is not the fastest machine, so let's be patient for a second. And there we are back in elements with all of the changes that I just made. Now, if I just hit save File, Save, it is going to overwrite the original photo. So if you are doing this, remember that you need to rename this because it's not On1 that's writing the word copy. You do save as. Yes, Murda.
I didn't understand that whole section you did with elements because I couldn't see elements at all. Was it just me?
You can't see elements on your screen right now?
No.
We just see the photo.
I only see On1.
Okay.
Was I the only one? I don't think anybody could hear me.
No, they can all hear you.
Oh, they can hear me. Oh, okay. Because when you did that whole thing, I didn't understand how you went, because I do have Photoshop elements in my computer.
All right, let me do something here.
Jay, I couldn't either.
All right, I just hit stop share. Let me go back and hit share. All right, does everybody see elements now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, yes, I
Right.
see it now.
Yes, now I can see
In
it.
elements,
Now I could see it.
in elements, if you hit filter, here is On1.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay, it's
Got it,
a little
got
hidden. It's not going to tell you where it is, but that's it. And if you then hit develop or effects, then it will open On1 and plop this photo right into On1.
Okay.
All right, and when you are done, then you hit that done button at the bottom of On1, and it will drop you back into here, right where you started from. And all you have to remember is don't hit save or you'll overwrite your original photo, and this will eliminate your original photo. Do save as and name it same name with copy or whatever the heck you want to name it.
Okay.
Any other questions? Because that
Jay,
is about all I wanted to cover today.
Jay,
Yes,
it's Bruce.
yes,
Could
Bruce.
Could you take a second and talk about the strengths of elements when you'd be using elements and swinging back to On1 or versus just
Sure.
staying in On1 or back and forth?
Sure. All right, hold on one second. Okay. I like to use elements for my basic adjustments. So I'll start in Elements Photo Raw. And I'll make those slide adjustments in Elements. I like using elements for cropping. I like using elements for leveling. And I like using elements for eliminating things from the photo. All right, whether I'm using the stamp tool or you know, whatever other tool. I think that Photoshop does a very good job with those. You will find those very same adjustments, things like stamp tools, in On1. I think that the elements implementation of those tools is slightly better. So I make all of those adjustments in elements. And then when I say, okay, now I want to apply an effect to this photo, or it's a portrait of someone and I want to improve their facial features, then I will jump into On1 and I will make those adjustments and then bounce back into elements. So I more often than not use elements and On1 as a team, as opposed to just starting in On1. The only thing that you can't do when you do that teaming is you cannot do layers, because layers involve more than one photo. And when you are jumping from elements, you're only jumping with one photo. So you can't select another photo. But other than that, if I'm doing layers, I will solely be using On1, but otherwise I will usually start with elements and then jump in and out of On1. What's neat about jumping in and out of On1 is that you're not losing any digital quality, because JPEG is not lossless. If you save in JPEG and then you open in JPEG and then you save in JPEG and open, each time you are losing an imperceptibly small amount of detail. But if you jump from elements into On1 and back, you are not saving anything. You are just digitally transferring. There's no loss of quality when you do that. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, Murda.
When I take a photo, I use the RAW file and the JPEG, right? I take a picture in both.
Right.
Does this program use the RAW? Why is it called On1 Raw?
Yes, yes. Just like Elements, it will open virtually any kind of file type. It will open a RAW file if that's what you are opening in On1.
And you can use it, you can see the picture with the RAW?
Sure.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You can't save a RAW file. You can't save a RAW file in any program, but you can open and adjust a RAW file in Elements. You can open a RAW file in On1. You can open a RAW file in Elements and then using that link, go over to On1 and then back. You're just not going to be able to save it as a RAW file because that's not possible.
Okay.
Other questions?
Okay, there are buttons at the bottom of the edit screen in On1 that say reset, reset all, and previous. Could you explain those?
Sure, hang on a second. Let me go back. Nope, that's not what I wanted. Stop share. Share screen. There we are. Okay. Okay. If you've made a lot of adjustments and you're not happy with those adjustments, you can reset it. If I've done a lot of different adjustments, all right? And I'm not happy. I want to start from scratch. If I hit reset, it'll eliminate everything that I've done and I'm back to zero, all right? Previous, I think, just eliminates the last step. But I usually go up to edit and I just hit undo, which I think is the same as previous. All right. There are a few other features that I didn't talk about today. One of them is resize. On1, about 3 years ago, bought a company called, I think it's Fractals. That is the industry standard for resizing. There is no program that is better for resizing than the resize module here in On1. So you can resize something by a factor of 5, perhaps even a factor of 10, and get a very good resizing, a very good copy. Very useful if you've got a photo that is of reasonable size, but you want to turn it into a 3-foot by 2-foot canvas. If you resize it in On1, you wind up with the best possible result. You can also tell it that you are going to be resizing it and using it for a canvas. And then you tell it how thick the edge is going to be. And then you can adjust the edges so that the, whether it's a reflection or a stretch or whatever, you can tell it that that's what you're going to do and it'll adjust accordingly. Other questions? As I said, next time we're going to talk about masking, which allows you to take any of those special effects and place them wherever you want. Sort of like the way the color enhancer was able to adjust just the green. But what if you wanted to take any of those 30 adjustments, those 30 special effects, and apply them to a particular area? You can do that. Oh, one other thing I wanted to show you while I have you on this screen is I always wondered why when it said effects, this button here didn't say effects. It should say add effect, but it doesn't say add effect. It says add filter. The reason why is that there are two types of effects. Most of the effects are filters. All right, I'd say add a filter, and that's what you get. You get the 30, all right? Up here on the upper right-hand side, you have, come on. You see, these are the same 30 filters. This is the same titles. But what this shows you is if you select any one of them, it shows you the various choices you have within that filter. So if I double click, let's say on antique, it should give me a bunch of thumbnails of what this photo would look like. Here we go. It's a little hard to see when the thumbnails are small, but that's why that's there. In addition to filters, there's also a button here called presets. And when you click on presets, these are additional special effects that On1 has provided. And every month they send additional presets for free that you can add to the program. And each of these boxes, and there are dozens and dozens of them, and each of them have dozens of choices within them. So you can spend ages looking at all of these various adjustments. You don't have to accept the adjustments the way they are, because once you've accepted an adjustment, either a preset or a filter, it will show up on the right-hand side here with all of its sliders, and you can change those sliders any way you like so that it suits your particular sensibilities. By the way you, if you open On1 and you don't see this, there's a little button down in the bottom left-hand corner. And if I click it, it disappears it. And if I click it again, it appears it. So if you don't see those choices and you want to see those choices, then you can click it. If you don't want to see those, excuse me, you don't want to see those choices, then this will allow more of the screen to be filled with your picture. The more real estate you fill with other things, the smaller your picture is. Any other questions before we sign off?
It's not ready for us to do. You gotta press the, here.
Can you hear me?
No.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh,
Okay, when you said going from On1 after you make adjustments to go back to photo elements,
Yep.
you said something about how to save it. Could you repeat that part again?
Sure. All right. Once you have gone from elements into On1, you've made your choices, and then you hit the done button, and you've jumped back into elements. Hold on one second. Let me get you back to elements. And now you're back in elements. You want to save this photo with a different name. And it's the way you would do it anytime you want to rename something. You do File, Save As, and then you save it wherever you want with whatever name you want. Just don't name it the same, because then you will overwrite the original photo.
Okay.
So give it a name. Save as. Thank you.
Okay? Any other questions before I stop the recording and sign off?
Have you ever used the retouch button on On1?
No. What retouch button are you referring to?
On
On1.
on On1, on the left-hand side, there's,
I tried it and it's just like the retouch that I know that Debbie and I use, right, Debbie?
Hold on a second. Let me go back to On1. All right. The retouch button. Which retouch button?
It's
are we
right
talking-
over view, right
Where?
above you. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yes. The retouch. I will discuss the retouch button next week when we talk about, well, not next week, in 2 weeks. But yes, the retouch, up at the top, you'll see there are 3 choices. Here's your stamping tool. Here's your, paint over and it replaces automatically, the perfect eraser. The retouch brush is somewhere in between the two,
okay.
right? But yes, these are your how to eliminate offending small things in the photo. I like the tools in Elements that do that for adjusting things in the photo. But I like to use this, and I'll show you how to use this to adjust portraits.
Okay.
Okay, I have one other question. When I was downloading the program, I saw that there's something called On1 Photo Raw 2020, but it seemed like 0.1.
Yes, that's the latest update.
So how do I know I have the latest update? Because I downloaded the 20 according to the purchase. I didn't go to 20.1 to download. So
Go to your, when you are in On1,
yes,
see, click on Help,
yes.
click on About, and it will tell you which version you have.
Okay.
Okay? If you don't have 0.1, which frankly is a minor adjustment, you might not even want to bother updating it, then you would, all right, let's see. Okay, Help. Check for updates.
Ah,
All right, and when you click on that, it will offer you an update if you want to do it. But if you already have 0.1, you're already there.
Yeah.
okay.
Frankly, the difference between 20 and the 0.1 is in my view, insignificant.
Okay, great, thanks.
All right? Okay, let me stop the share, and I'm going to stop the recording.
Thank you.
Thank you
so
very much.